Look, it's fine, okay? Orphan 55 is just fine. Maybe it's the fact I've never watched Planet of the Apes and I've not grown sick of the "oh my god, it was Earth all along" trope the way others seem to have, but the revelation actually hit me pretty hard. It helps that the apocalyptic future presented is not the result of an alien invasion or some weird science fiction thing, but global warming, something which is a very real-life threat to the planet right now. I'm not going to do a full in-depth review here, since all of my key criticisms have already been covered elsewhere. Basically, it boils down to the episode trying to cram too much stuff in at once and giving its themes little room to breathe. I will, however, be using the most contentious part of Orphan 55, its ending, as a jumping off point to address the wider questions of what is and is not considered political in Doctor Who, and at what point does the show go too far with its messages. 3 words which seem to get thrown around almost interchangeably in the discourse surrounding current Doctor Who, and I use that term very loosely, are preachiness, politics, and agenda. All of these terms have quite different meanings, and I'd argue in most cases some of them apply while others do not. Let's look at that ending of Orphan 55 for instance. It's preachy for sure, no one in their right mind would argue against that, and in itself that is not necessarily a bad thing, we'll get to that in a moment. But is it political? Now, one obvious response is all media is political, a phrase which Mr. TARDIS Reviews, among others, likes to hammer out like there is no tomorrow, as though it implies something deeply thought-provoking and meaningful. But really, this is a pretty redundant and unhelpful statement, because it doesn't say anything. Now, the word political does get heavily abused, often to refer to any piece of media expressing any opinion whatsoever the individual happens to disagree with, but the underlying implication, as I understand, is that the film or book or TV show in question has an inherent affinity with a certain political party and bias toward that end of the political spectrum. I find it more helpful for the purposes of discussion to substitute the word political with political agenda. All art may be political, but not all of it has an agenda, which I define here as when one's actions or opinions on something are clouded by an ulterior underlying motive. Not every agenda is a political one. Michael Grade had an agenda when he cancelled Doctor Who because he hates science fiction. Others are, like Bolstrek and friends, actively want the current series of Doctor Who to fail because it fits in with their hateful neo-Nazi propaganda, and that's why you will never see a positive word spoken about the show so long as the Doctor is anything other than a white male. So going back, is the Doctor's preachy message about global warming political? Not by my definition, or at least it shouldn't be. See, climate change is something very real. It is happening right now all around us, and whether you are right-leaning, left-leaning, Labour, Tory or whatever, you would have to be a complete idiot to deny something needs to be done about it. I'm not saying the issue of climate change doesn't have a place on a political spectrum, of course it does, but anyone who would try to argue against this very simple message that climate change will destroy the planet and do something about it is so deluded they are not worth humouring, let alone pandering to. Council of Geeks introduced the phrase poking the bear to refer to certain moments that seem deliberately put in by Chibnall to provoke certain toxic individuals, namely the "I've had an upgrade" line from the opener. But the thing is, there is nothing whatsoever wrong with that line. If insecure man-babies choose to make a big deal out of it, that's ultimately their problem, and opting to pander to those individuals only sends out a message that there is actually some smidgen of integrity to their rhetoric. So my response is, yes, it is poking the bear, and that's good. Keep on poking that bear. Let all the crybabies get riled up so we can all point and laugh at them. Same applies here with Orphan 55. That's not to say that the ending of the episode is perfect by any means, just that the problem isn't with the message itself or the preachiness of it. It's in the execution. The way Orphan 55 goes about exploring its theme of the week is by tacking an on-the-nose speech spelling out the themes to the end of the programme. As Stu Bagful points out, even the thematic elements that could have been used to tie into such a payoff feel rather disjointed as they are presented.
This idea that climate change has fucked the planet up and rich people can pay for the privilege of going to a place where they can pretend that climate change hasn't happened, really, that's some incisive commentary there. But it's like no one on staff noticed that exploring this would be a much better way of underlining this episode's point, rather than just having the Doctor say what the episode's point was at the end.
Our old friend Mr. TARDIS had some similar points, but he also had this to say regarding the ending speech.
Yeah, it's all well and good the Doctor saying we need to come together and solve all of these solutions to save the planet, but if she actually wanted to make a change, she would have looked directly into the camera and said, if you voted for Boris Johnson, you are creating an Orphan 55 future.
See, now that would have been unpolitical. Such a suggestion can only be taken as being tongue-in-cheek, since Trilby TARDIS knows very well the BBC would not be so stupid as to piss off half their audience like that. Look, I'm not going to get into whether or not Boris Johnson is a climate change denier or a fascist or whatever the other buzzword of the week is. That isn't the point I'm making here. But the fact is, more than half the country voted Conservative in the last general election, so to have the Doctor say something like that would be extremely divisive, to put it mildly. But also, you have to ask, is it really helpful to overtly politicise the issue of global warming in this manner? As I said, climate change is a real danger happening to us right now, and the first step is making everyone aware of the fact and getting everyone to listen and care, not just supporters of Jeremy Corbyn or those at one end of a polarised political spectrum. And this is important because wherever you go right now, there is still a lot of blissful ignorance at just how serious the threat facing us is. Whenever I witness people raging on and on about Brexit, the line about humanity arguing about the washing up while the house is burning down rings ever so painfully true. And that's why this unpolitically weighted delivery of the moral, preachy as it might be, is one I can really get behind. I just wish that the build-up to that eventual payoff had been more focused. That might have turned an okay episode into a truly great one. I'm Midnight, and I just lost my train of thought.